Hello everyone, welcome back to the
Critical 3!
Today we are going to be talking about the Shrek 1 and 2. Hi everyone, and now for some quick facts. The first Shrek was released on May 18, 2001 with a budget of $6 million. On its opening weekend, the film made $42.3 million at the box office, topping the box office. On its second weekend, $55.2 million over the 4-day weekend. The film finished second place behind Pearl Harbor. In its third weekend, $28.2 million for a 7,695 average, public signing to 3,661 theaters. It became the top grossing movie of 2001. This achievement would last until mid-December, when it was beaten by Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. The main voices in the movie are Mike Mars, Eddie Murphy, Karen Diaz, John Lithgow, Aaron Warner, Christopher Knights, Bobby Block, and Cody Cameron. Next, Shrek 2 was released on May 19, 2004, with a budget of $150 million. On its opening weekend, the film made $104.3 million at the box office and at number 1 at the box office. The second biggest 3-day in movie history behind 2002 Spider-Man. On its second weekend, it remained at number 1, grossing another $95.6 million over the 4-day Memorial Day, narrowly beating the $85.8 million new movie The Day After Tomorrow. It spent 10 weeks in the weekly top 10. It's also the highest worldwide gross made by an animated feature, which was before held by Finding Nemo, the highest grossing film of 2004. And the voices are the same cast in the original film. New characters are Julia Andrews, John Cheese, Antonio Banderas, Rupert Everett, Jennifer Salters, Mark Mosley, and Christopher Knights.
Spoiler, just a teardrop away. In the first Shrek, Shrek is an ogre that lives in a swamp. One day, a bunch of these characters from these fairy tales and fictional stories end up being relocated to a swamp, all because of someone by the name of Lord Farquaad. One of them being, of course, a donkey named Donkey. Not knowing what to do, Shrek and Donkey go over to Lord Farquaad, and he pretty much makes a bet with Farquaad, saying that he'll go rescue a princess out of a tower for him. That princess happens to be Fiona, who not only is trapped in that tower, but also, during the night, she is cursed to become an ogre. And that tower is also being guarded by a dragon. So, Shrek and Donkey go over to the tower and they end up rescuing Fiona. Well, Donkey ends up being used as bait against the dragon, which ends up causing something, let's say, uncomfortably romantic. They end up traveling back to Farquaad's kingdom, but over the time, Shrek falls for Fiona and Fiona falls for Shrek. None of them knows that each other is an ogre, but eventually they do find out, and they decide to be together, instead of Fiona going to be with Farquaad, and as a result, the spell kind of breaks, but instead of being turned back into a human, she remains an ogre. Because Shrek is her soulmate. In Shrek 2, a few weeks after they get married, Shrek and Fiona Donkey end up getting invited to go to the Kingdom of Far, Far Away by Fiona's parents, or the King and Queen. And once the King and Queen meet Shrek, the King isn't fond of it. The Queen is actually thinks it's kind of cool. During the first night, Shrek, while in his and Fiona's bedroom, ends up finding Fiona's childhood diary. And it says that she was originally supposed to marry Prince Charming. But of course, that didn't happen. Shrek starts to feel self-conscious about himself. He decides, I don't know, to maybe go for a walk for the castle. And then while Shrek is gone out of the room for a few minutes, the fairy godmother appears, and when Shrek returns, the fairy godmother realizes, oh my god, she is married to an ogre. She ends up abruptly leaving, and she and her son, Prince Charming, end up going over to the king and basically go about their anger about how Charming was supposed to marry Fiona and not an ogre. The fairy godmother ends up making a deal with the king to find a way to get rid of Shrek. So the king, the very next day, goes over to a pub to talk to someone that can kill an ogre. That person being Puss in Boots. Anyway, so the very next day, following after that, Shrek and Donkey end up basically going for a walk, and they end up being attacked by Puss. But Puss decides to not kill Shrek after realizing Shrek is innocent. And the three of them become traveling companions and close friends. The three of them go over to the fairy godmother's workshop, and the fairy godmother ends up basically going on a rant to Shrek, saying that ogres don't get happy endings. And Shrek ends up accidentally drinking a potion, and so does Puss, and so does Donkey. And they turn into different things. Shrek turns into a human, Donkey turns into a horse, and I can't even remember what Puss turns into.
He doesn't really transform into anything. Which kind of implies that he's perfect as is, I guess.
And when Shrek realizes that he's now in human form, he's freaking out. He has to get back to the castle to be with Fiona, realizing that the fairy godmother is up to something pretty darn... Anyway, back at the castle, Fiona finds herself turning back into a human. Because, again, a caveat to curse being broken is that she has to be in the same form as the person she's in love with, which happens to be Shrek. Prince Charming shows up, and he kind of pretends to be Shrek. Pretends to be Shrek, as that's his the scheme of him and his mother planning. And eventually Fiona does realize that, hey, a minute, something's not right here. So, of course, Fiona is skeptical that this is Shrek, when it really isn't. It's Prince Charming trying to be him. So the fairy godmother decides to come up with a plan, which is to put a spell on some tea during a party to make Fiona fall in love with Charming, thinking it's Shrek. But the fairy godmother knows that Shrek will try to stop whatever's going on, and so will Donkey and the Puss in Boots. So she ends up capturing all three of them into the dungeon. The fairy tale characters, they have met. They end up deciding to do revolution and go and save their friends.
Yeah.
And then they end up rescuing their friends and they end up stopping whatever's going on. And surprisingly, even the king stops the plan once the king realizes what the fairy godmother is actually up to. So the fairy godmother ends up turning the king into a frog, indicating that the king originally started off as a frog. Ergo, he was the frog prince before he met the queen. Thankfully, Shrek is able to kind of react by blasting the fairy godmother with her wand, making her basically die. And everyone celebrates. And the king accepts Shrek as his son-in-law. Oh, and the dragon comes in and it's revealed that she's pregnant.
Now it's time for
Rapid fire factoids.
whoops. Let's just ignore the potential manslaughter charges and get on with it, shall we? So to start off, we gotta talk about the 1995 I Feel Good animation test. For the uninitiated, this was a long-lost test animation done by a group at DreamWorks named the Propellerheads, which included J.J. Abrams, yes, that J.J. Abrams, Rob Letterman, Michael Ovitz, and Lauren Soman, who did the animation. It depicts an early version of Shrek, then voiced by Chris Farley, dancing and singing the titular song in a dark village street. A mugger, voiced by Tom Kenny, allegedly, attempts to mug him, but Shrek launches him into the air. On November 23, 2023, the full test with audio was uploaded onto YouTube by the test production designer Barry Jackson, the Zoom Art Studio on YouTube. For a brief period, the original upload was set to private, but it has since been made public again. Finally, on January 2, 2024, Brian Drucker found more high-resolution test images on his old hard drive. A big reason why the aesthetic changed so much between the test and the finished film was because DreamWorks co-founder Jeffrey Katzenberg disliked the test, and there was a divide between the artists for the art direction. Some wanting the film to have a dark, grungy look, and others wanting a look more akin to traditional fairy tales and The Wizard of Oz, with the style of the finished film being a mix of both. William Steig published Shrek on October 17, 1990. Steven Spielberg had purchased the rights to Shrek in 1991, with John H. Williams convincing him to bring it to DreamWorks, which Spielberg co-founded. Williams, Jeffrey Katzenberg, and Aaron Warner started production on Shrek in 1995. Spielberg initially wanted Shrek to be traditionally animated. Tom Cruise and Leonardo DiCaprio were initially considered for the role of Shrek, since Shrek was initially going to be a teenager. Other actors considered for Shrek were Nicolas Cage, Bill Murray, and most famously, Chris Farley. Co-director Andrew Adamson suggested to Katzenberg that they add more sex jokes to the film and put Guns N' Roses in the soundtrack. Despite Katzenberg wanting to attract adults as well as kids, he found this too outrageous. Kelly Asbury was initially considered to co-direct with Adamson, but left to work on Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron. She was replaced by Vicki Jensen after a disastrous test screening of what they had finished, with Jensen in feeling the film's initial adventure tone clashed with the toilet humor. The film's screenplay was written by Ted Elliott, Terry Rossio, Joe Stillman, and Roger S. H. Schulman. Savvy viewers might know that we reviewed another film that Rossio was involved with, Treasure Planet. Another factor in Jensen being appointed as co-director was her work as a layout artist on Ren and Stimpy, which Shrek's humor takes inspiration from. Steve Martin was initially considered to voice Donkey. Famously, Chris Farley had recorded 85% of Shrek's dialogue before he died on December 18, 1997. Shrek was going to be more wide-eyed and cheerful, and Fiona more sarcastic and grumpy, with Fiona being voiced by Janine Garofalo originally. However, when they swapped personality traits, Cameron Diaz would get the role of Fiona. Hey, didn't we talk about Cameron Diaz before? At first, Jim Farley was contacted to replace Chris, but he turned it down due to dealing with grief. Mike Myers would take on the role of Shrek, and initially did a Chris Farley impression, then a barbarian voice, then his regular voice before settling on a Scottish accent. According to Katzenberg, it was so late into production that they had to spend $4 million redoing Shrek's lip sync, though Myers disputes this. Steven Spielberg still served as an executive producer, though he was uncredited. Shrek 2 was released on May 19, 2004. An alternative version of Shrek and Donkey meeting Puss in Boots was storyboarded, and recorded and then rewritten. Although most of the story beats and jokes are in the final film, some things are changed. Instead of Donkey saying the directions they were given, he immediately mentions the bush shaped like Shirley Bassey. He would also acknowledge how awful Shrek and Harold shooting little creatures as an activity for his royal blessing is. Puss was going to give Shrek the idea of visiting the fairy godmother, instead of Shrek using fairy godmother's card. Happiness, just a teardrop away. The fairy godmother was originally considered to appear in the first film, but was saved for Shrek 2. Shrek 2 was dedicated to William Steig, who passed away in 2003. Antonio Banderas voices Puss in Boots in English and in both Spanish dubs, Latin American and European. Something interesting is that while in English he speaks with an overt Spaniard accent. In the Spanish dubs he speaks with a somewhat exaggerated version of his natural accent from his hometown Malaga in southern Spain. The reason Puss in Boots discards his cape after his first scene is because early CGI limitations made it difficult to render. Tellingly, while the tie-in games retained the cape without issue, as there was far less worry about it clipping into a model there, it wouldn't be until Puss in Boots' The Last Wish, released 18 years after Shrek 2 with a far more simplified and dynamic art style, that Puss would finally get to keep his cape for the entire movie. Originally, after first turning human, Shrek was stopped from reaching Fiona by the far, far away police department arresting him, but the creators opted for a moment of emotional vulnerability instead. This scene was replaced by Fairy Godmother convincing him that Fiona is happier with Prince Charming. Accidentally in Love by Counting Crows replaced a song recorded by Weezer that was deemed not to fit over the honeymoon montage. The song had to be carefully timed over visuals, which were already locked down and couldn't be changed. King Harold was going to be naked for the first half of the movie as a homage to the Emperor's new clothes, with his privates always covered by random objects. Prince Charming in early drafts is much more childish and prone to throwing tantrums. Though he's still a naive mama's boy in the final version, his immaturity is heavily toned down. The filmmakers intended to show the happily ever after form of Dragon as a pink Pegasus. In the final movie, Dragon doesn't appear until the end since they realized that she would have made breaking Shrek, Donkey, and Puss out of jail and crashing the ball too easy. The ending ball was going to be a costume ball, and the king was dressed as a magic mirror, which would have reflected the fairy godmother's spell rather than the royal armor he wears in the final movie. Also, one idea for the final battle involved the fairy godmother enchanting food to attack Shrek. Jennifer Saunders recorded lines as the fairy godmother, promising to return, in case the filmmakers desired to bring her back in any further installments. However, it wasn't the case, and the fairy godmother was killed off in the film. And that was my
Rapid fire factoid.
So, what is there to say about Shrek that hasn't already been said? Many people have already sung this movie's praises, and it absolutely deserves it. It's a modern animated classic. And not to mention, it changed the course of animated cinema. And especially had an impact on, say, 2D animation for better or worse. By the way, watch your Treasure Planet video for why 2D animation died. There's very good reason why this movie was selected for preservation by Library of Congress, because, I don't know, I can't really imagine a world without Shrek. I mean, for better or worse. As for Shrek 2, now, this to me is an example of a sequel that actually takes what worked in the original and builds on it. And I mean, like, how can you not love that climax with Jennifer Saunders' cover of I Need a Hero? Like, it not only ups the stakes in the action, but also the drama. And not to mention, it also has the introduction of Puss in Boots, who would become a mainstay of the franchise in and of himself, and would even basically have his own sub-series. So yeah, Shrek 1, great movie. Shrek 2, even better.
What are my overalls for the Shrek movies? Well, for starters, in the beginning of Shrek, they played the song All Star by Smash Mouth. In the end of the first movie, they sang I'm a Believer. That was sang by Eddie Murphy. Oh, and they had the best soundtrack though. Best years of our lives. What I like about the first movie is, the setting is great. Oh, I almost forgot the other song that I like is Hallelujah. Now for the second one. The second one was even better. The beginning part was Accidentally in Love, which is one of the most beautiful songs of all time. And then in the end, they all sang Livin' La Vida Loca by Ricky Martin. So I'm gonna say Shrek 1 was the best movie ever, but Shrek 2, wow, that is so much better.
And my one problem with the first movie is that there's the third act breakup. As in, that scene that happens to be in every animated film where, say, like, the main characters have to somehow split up, or there has to be a split in the friendship for like a temporary drama, but you just know they're going to get back together by the end.
I liked Shrek. I liked it. The story was good. The villain, not so much.
Don't talk smack about my man Farquaad.
But I like the friendship between Shrek and Donkey. They had a good friendship. And of course, the idea of an ogre falling off of a princess kind of. I know what people will say. Wasn't that kind of used for Beauty and the Beast in sort of a way? But other than, with the idea of a woman falling in love with a creature, but
It turns out to be sort of the opposite in a way.
But this time it turns out to be an opposite.
Yeah.
But either way, it worked. Shrek 2, I gotta say, I liked it more than the first. I'm like, a better villain. Having it take place in a kingdom was brilliant. Also, the climax was
Iconic. Yeah.
And introducing Puss in Boots, I didn't expect it coming. I didn't expect it. But I'm so glad it did. Overall, the first one was okay, but the second one was even better.
This might be the only review where we've generally agreed with each other's points. Yeah. Come on.
Alright, let's talk about the obvious. The romance between a donkey and a dragon?
Oh.
I mean, I get it. I know you're trying to be weird. But a donkey and a dragon? Look, I get. There's weird romances. We all know there's weird romances like Steve Urkel and Warren Winslow from Family Matters, but a donkey and a dragon? What was you thinking? Look, I get you want to have sort of like two romances being played out at the same time in the Shrek franchise, but a donkey and a dragon?
Just thank God that the dragon is a woman and the donkey is a male.
But come on, how do you... And secondly, how in the world does a donkey and a dragon have babies together? Like, that doesn't together. Like, that doesn't make sense. Doesn't compute.
Stop trying to fill in those gaps.
It doesn't compute.
Okay, that's enough. We don't need any more of those cursed images on our minds.
And now for my top 5 romantic movies. Number 1, Me Before You. 2, 27 Dresses. 3, The Fault in Our Stars. 4, The Vow. And 5, Titanic. If you hadn't seen any of these movies, I suggest you should watch them. It'll be just in time for Valentine's Day.
Shrek 1 6 out of 10 donkeys.
What?
I rate Shrek 2 9 out of 10 ogres.
That's not a 10 out of 10. Well, you deserve what's coming to you. 6 out of 10 for Shrek? Preposterous.
I rate for Shrek 1 8 out of 10. Shrek 2 10 out of 10. The perfect sequel. A modern fairy tale love story.
Okay. Now here's for the correct rating. I give Shrek 9 onions out of 10. A true modern anime classic that changed animation, and I will not hear otherwise. Shrek 2, 10 onions out of 10. The definition of a perfect sequel that improves on the original in every way. There.
But, oh, come on. I did 9 out of 10. The problem was with the donkeys.
Stop mentioning that.
But other than that, it would have been a 10 out of 10 if it just didn't go that far.
Well, ogres love onions.
Yep. Here goes.
Go.
Oh, not bad. Oh, not bad. Not bad at all.
Not bad.
You know what? That was very anticlimactic.
Yeah, you're right about
And just like that, onions have layers. Ogres have layers. Onions have layers.
You get it?
I mean, sure, it tastes a bit minty, but it's not bad. It's not
Yeah.
bad. It doesn't taste like a bad minty.
Minty? Minty.
Yeah.
I bet your breath's not gonna smell very minty.
Woo! Those onions must be taking effect. Oh. Oh.
Man, you're right. The tears are coming now. So long.
Why do we have to eat the onions?
I really hate the
Oh man, I'm so glad I didn't eat these onions.
You be quiet.
Yeah, please.
And that wraps up the show. I would highly recommend to watch the romantic movie It Ends With Us. The story is so beautiful, and it's based on a novel by Colleen Hoover. Blake Lively is so good in it. She's one of my favorite actresses. And the rest of the cast is great, including Jenny State. I'm surprised that the movie was a box office hit. Oh, and just a heads up, everyone. There is some domestic violence and physical abuse. I would give this movie a 9 out of 10. So worth watching.
So as for my recommendation, I would have to go with, well, of course, My Bloody Valentine. It's a classic Valentine's Day slasher, and I think is an underrated gem of a slasher genre. Not only is it considered Quentin Tarantino's favorite slasher movie, but also it was filmed right here in Sydney Mines, Nova Scotia. So, basically, if you're a fan of slashers, I recommend giving it a watch.
I would recommend watching 13 Going on Furry. There's some fantasy, but the developing romance between the main character and her guy best friend is actually pretty enjoyable. But of course, there's fantasy in it too, which makes it even more fun. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.
Oh, and stay away from monies at all costs.
Please watch this movie on Facebook, or you can look it up on YouTube. The Critical
Critical
Three.
Three.